Morning, everyone. How are we going? Okay, so I'm just going to check that I'm coming to you live and that you can hear me really, really well. Oh, I can't believe we're on day 3 of the insights already. This has been so much fun. Okay, so let's just get this ready. And here we go. Are we on live? Yes, we are. Perfect. And you can hear me, which is good. All right. Yes. Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to keep that there in case there are any questions that come through. So for you that are on live with me, say hi. Let me know that you're there and let me know that you can hear me okay. It is just after 11 o'clock in the morning in Port Douglas, and my husband has gone and taken Liam out for a drive because he's a tired boy and he needs a bit of a rest, and Max is just watching TV in the other room, so he might come and interrupt us in a little while, even though I've asked him not to, but we'll see. Okay, so let me get comfy. All right, so today we are on day 3 of the insights in You Are Meant for More. And I was going back into the book today, and I have to read the 3rd insight and the paragraph in between the what you can do piece, because I don't think I can say it more succinctly than the way that I've written it in here. And I think this is just going to sum up what today is all about, you know, because let me begin. All right, 3rd insight. Don't waste time and energy on an imagined future, especially if it makes you feel powerless and out of control. And in the book, I talk about my journey, which I'll go into again in a moment. But for now, it says, there are honestly so many imagined states of being we might one day experience. However, if we spend any of our present moments thinking about them, we start to feel what we would if we were already there. Our emotions are so powerful that when we spend time needlessly worrying, we are emotionally starting to live out that imagined existence, which is when the worry and fear take over and we begin to feel powerless and out of control. We start to believe that our future is cast and we are doomed for that existence, when in fact, that doesn't have to be the case. Hey, Lisa, thank you for joining. So how did everyone find that 3rd insight? I think for me, one of the biggest pieces that I've noticed on my journey to, I guess, self-awareness, purpose, being the person that I am today, doing what I do, is I used to worry so much, especially as a kid, and being an empath and intuitive, worrying became like a state of existence for me. I'd always worry about what if, and that used to take up so much energy and so much time that, like we talked about yesterday in the insights, you know, there comes a point when you subconsciously struggle between wanting to prove yourself right with the outcomes that you're creating and actually working against yourself to create the things that you're worrying about. So in the book, when I'm talking about this 3rd insight of not wasting time and energy on an imagined future, especially if it makes you feel powerless and out of control, it really was summed up in my journey. So having Max, you know, I could have spent that entire 1 year of parental leave worrying about having to leave him in a year's time and go back to work. And when I realized how much that was affecting me and how those feelings about leaving him and not wanting to were literally driving me to not enjoy my time with him because I was so scared of losing him to, you know, daycare and childcare and such like, and having to be apart from him, that it was affecting me mentally, physically, spiritually, and it was stopping me from making the most of the time that I did have with him. And that's when something needed to change. You know, that was when I needed to take control of what I was thinking and feeling. And for me, it was an imagined future state that I was anticipating as a possibility. Whereas that vision hadn't been cast at that point. You know, David and I had an expectation that I needed to go back to work, that I needed to earn a certain amount of money in order for us to keep the lifestyle that we had grown accustomed to and that we wanted. What I've learned over the years is, you know, that's an expectation, but the how that is going to be delivered in terms of that income that we want doesn't have to be predetermined. So, for example, now I talk about consciously creating the existence and the life that you love and deserve, and the business that you like and you love and you deserve. And when I talk about that, I talk about, you know, creating that end state of an imagined vision and an expectation of what you want to create. So your very best imagined future, right? Allow the how to develop and evolve naturally. So if I'd have known then, you know, 5 years ago, nearly 6 now, what I know now, I would have been sharing with myself that, you know, I can consciously create X amount of dollars in an income so that I can stay home and be with Max through creating a business that I'm passionate about, that I feel purposeful about, that, you know, would actually express the journey that I'd been on, as opposed to sitting in the worry state of the imagined future that I believed was the only option for me. You know, and that's because logic had told me at that point in my life that in order to make money, it has to be the easiest route, which is the most logical route, which is I need to go back to the job that I was working in before I had Max, because I'm good at it. I know what I do. I've already got a reputation there. I don't need to build my business brand or my career brand in the company that I'm with. I'm already respected. They'll allow me to work part-time. It really is a sensible option, you know? And that was where I sat. As opposed to when I had Liam, you know, 2.5 years later, and I allowed my journey to unfold, and I actually went after something that I wanted, because the idea of going back to a job that I was no longer as passionate about was not fulfilling enough for me, and that my lifestyle had dictated a different way of being and a different way of thinking. So there is a very big difference between consciously creating the reality that you want to have, owning that expectation of an imagined future, versus worrying about an imagined future. And I think that sentence in that book that I just regurgitated about, you know, that piece, I'm going to read it back out again, but that piece about the control that you have, you know, there are so many imagined states of being we might one day experience, you know. However, if we spend any of our present moments thinking about them, we start to feel them as if they're already there. And that's where that worry piece comes in. You know, we start to think that this is our only option, and if it is, how are we going to feel about that, and then what are we going to do about that? And you know, our emotions are so powerful that when we spend time needlessly worrying, we're emotionally starting to live out that imagined existence, which is when worry and fear take over and we begin to feel powerless and out of control. And that is exactly what occurs. You know, this third insight of don't waste your time and energy on an imagined future especially if it makes you feel powerless and out of control. You know, how much better is it to imagine and consciously create a future where you feel complete, where you feel whole, where you feel joy, where you feel happiness? But so many of us don't live in that envisaged state. You know, we sit there and we worry mostly about the worst case scenario as opposed to the best case scenario, because we don't think we deserve the best case scenario. Hey Teresa, how you doing? And Lisa is saying, I was like that too. Hey Amy, thank you guys for joining me. I'm so grateful. It really is that it is as simple as taking out the worry around the worst case scenario that could occur and sitting in that kind of visionary state of, this is what I want my future to look like. This is where I want to be going. This is what I'm working on consciously creating. Sitting in that feeling of, wow, I've already got it and I'm already there, as opposed to, you know, this is what's likely to happen because that makes sense and that's what I'm used to and that's what I'm familiar with. And this is how your brain works. Your brain goes, you know, this is what I already know. This is what I've experienced. It's like going to a new country. You know, you can research the new country, you can explore the new country, you can talk about, you know, cultural beliefs and expectations. But until you actually step into that new country and you go about that kind of experience of what's actually like being there in your physical body with your senses and perceptions going on and soaking all that goodness up, it's hard to really understand what the experience would be like because you've not been there. So, you know, projecting yourself into the future state is fantastic. That is what we talk about when we consciously create. But what we don't talk about is, you know, losing that control and losing that power. So if you start to slip into, you know, the worry around, well, how is that possible? How am I ever going to get there? How is that ever going to happen to me? I'm not going to be able to, you know, produce this end result. That's just illogical. You know, unicorns don't exist, for example. If you start worrying into that aspect, then your vibration lowers, your expectations lower, you start doubting yourself, you start believing that you're no longer deserving, and then everything shifts and you start to lose that control and that power over your own beliefs, your ability to consciously create what you want and how you want it to be and what you honestly believe you deserve, and that then seeps into everything else. Oh, you ladies are lovely. Thank you. I'm literally just out of the shower. Thank you. I'm feeling really, like I am actually feeling really good today. Strangely enough, we went out yesterday with some friends and we had a great day. And I think that's probably really, really helped, being around some really high vibe, awesome people. And the kids, you know, coped really, really well, which is always real, you know, a real bliss. So I think that's probably why. It's probably filtered in from yesterday, which is good, which is really good. So this, for me, this third insight of, you know, developing an understanding of when you're in your worry state and when you're in your visionary state is so, so powerful. You know, I honestly believe that, you know, back when I had Max, when I was talking about my story in the book, in my chapter, I honestly believe that I had the power to ruin that entire year if I had not have been so self-aware. You know, I could have honestly missed out on an entire year of enjoying my time with him if I'd have allowed myself to worry about having to go back to work and what that was going to look like and what that was going to feel like. Because I did, you know, in the book, what actually happened in my journey and my story was I did go back to work. So I had Max. 12 months later, I went back to work and I worked part-time, 3 days a week. and I put Max into a daycare, which was just round the corner from where I was working. And it was really tough. You know, I didn't like being away from him. But what I'd imagined, you know, in that period of time before I realized what I was doing to myself and how it was actually affecting me, I was living I was living out that reality that was potentially going to be happening, that I was going to hate going back to work because I would resent being there and being away from my child. And what actually happened was something completely different. So I ended up going back to work, didn't hate it. I actually really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the space. And as soon as I could see that Max was comfortable and settled and cared for at daycare, and that I could still carry on feeding him, and that I could be good at what I was doing at work without feeling guilty from being away from him, and that I could actually have the best of both worlds. And I got up every morning and I used to put Max in the front pack, and we used to walk from the car to a cafe, and we used to have breakfast in a cafe every single morning. I say every single morning, 3 days a week when I was at work. It was incredible. And I really enjoyed that time and that space with him. It became a real treat that we did, so that we did something special together on those 3 days a week. And the other 2 days, you know, we were at home doing our own routine, and it was amazing. So that imagined state that I'd been so fearful of for that period of time that I was aware of it, actually didn't turn out to be so bad. It actually turned out to be really quite healthy for me as a person to start to separate myself and have some time on my own. It was actually a really good thing. So even though I had identified that it was going to be awful and terrible, whilst I was transitioning into understanding that I still had control and choice and, you know, the option to not do it if I didn't like it, because if there was anything that I wasn't happy about with Max and how he was being raised and where he was, then we wouldn't have carried on in that way. We would have made a change. But it was just trusting myself that those things, if they occurred, I was going to notice them, be aware of them, and do something about them, you know. And that was the difference, I think. Having had that experience and then having the reflection and the recap through writing that chapter and that insight, I could see quite clearly, and I can see myself now quite clearly. I trust that if something does turn out the way that I wouldn't like it to turn out, that I will stop now, that I will stop and I will reevaluate, and I will have the courage and the commitment to be able to do that. But also I have the insight and the wisdom to know that what I think might happen as an imagined state in my head doesn't always eventuate in the way that I think it will. And even if it does, it doesn't always feel the way that I think it might feel if I was there. Does that make sense? So Lisa. Hey, Sandy, it's good to see you. Okay, so Lisa, how do you cope with a partner who is like that all the time? I've always seen that as being negative. Okay, how do I cope with a partner who's like that all the time? Tell me what like that is. What bit was I talking about at the time? Sorry, the comments aren't coming up exactly at the time that I'm speaking. They kind of just come in a bulk. I think that's just the internet that I've got at the moment where we are. So a partner who is like that all the time. Okay. Just wait for Lisa to write that out. So I can, you know, I didn't cover it in the chapter in the book, but, you know, with all honest disclosure, that time that I was sitting in worry and anxiety and fear of the future of going back to work when we had Max, it made my relationship with David miserable. You know, I remember sitting at the kitchen bench, crying my eyes out because I was terrified of going back to work, and Max was only a couple of months old. And David was like, what is this? Like, you know, we knew when we had a family, you'd only ever be able to have a year off and you'd have to go back to work. You love work. Like, there was no, I guess, there was no build up to it. There was no, it was just there. It was just that big kind of, all of a sudden I had this realization and I was another mess. And he was like, where's this coming from? You know, this is what we agreed. This is what we thought. This is, you know, he didn't have the whole story book that I'd created in my head of what this was going to be like and what this was going to mean and how I was going to feel, because I had an idea of how I was going to feel as a mum, and that wasn't how I felt. You know, I ended up feeling so much more deeply, feelings that I'd never explored or uncovered. They didn't even exist pre-motherhood. You know, there was no way of uncovering them without having that experience and that journey and that little baby in my arms at the time. You know, I couldn't have anticipated any of that. Okay, comment. Seeing the worry of the future, Lisa is saying. Okay, always seeing what could happen, the worst case scenarios. Yeah. Okay, so there is a very big difference between seeing the worst case scenario and living with that as your intended future. Okay, so one of them, and this is very common for guys because they're the providers, they're the logical ones, they have a different way in which their brain tends to compute information. So David can always see the worry of the future in the sense of this could happen, you know, and then he will take certain actions or directions to mitigate that, to say, okay, that's not something that I want to happen. But he will also turn around and say, do you know what? There's nothing I can do about it right now. If it happens, I know, I trust myself to be able to deal with it, whatever that might be. Okay? But I can't let it affect my present right now because there's literally nothing I can do. So then he forgets it. He compartmentalizes it. He doesn't let it control the present moment if there's actually nothing substantial that he can do to mitigate that. And I think this is the, you know, the awareness. There's seeing the worries of the future, because let's face it, there's so many. You know, second time round pregnancy, I remember I was so nervous about going to my 12-week scan the second time round because I knew how much it meant to have another child. It wasn't that I didn't know that there's a reason there are 12-week scans. You know, I remember I was scared the second time round in case we would see something on the scan that we didn't want to see, you know. And that had come through to me because of so many friends who had gone through the heartbreak of finding out at their 12-week scan that, you know, they'd lost their baby. That had never even crossed my mind the first time round because I hadn't experienced it. It hadn't even occurred to me. And second time round, I knew that that wasn't the case for us, but I'd absorbed that knowledge and that worry externally from other people because of their experiences. And I'd felt so deeply, you know, empathically even, the pain that they had experienced through that. And my heart literally went out to them. So when we were going through it, it was nerve-wracking for me the second time round. There's a difference, you know, through absorbing more information the second time round and knowing how much something means to you because you've already experienced something similar previously. That's a different level of worry for the future. Worrying, it's sitting in that place of worry that is the unhealthy state. You know, having the expectation that something may occur later on and accepting that, okay, that's popped into my mind for some reason, one way or another way. What can I do about it now? What must I do about it? What's it telling me? What's it teaching me? You know, sometimes it's actually teaching us that we don't need to be worrying about that state. What we need to be noticing is how it's making us feel, or why we're so worried about that, and facing that fear in that moment, as opposed to thinking that it's going to happen, if that makes sense. So how do you cope with a partner who is like that all the time? I've always seen that as being negative. You know, well, if you see it as being negative and he sees it as taking care of you, for example, or taking care of the family, then maybe that's a conversation around who holds the burden of what might happen. And, you know, asking questions of him potentially, Lisa, around, you know, how is that making you feel? What can I do to help you with that? That feels, you know, that looks like it feels as though it's a lot to carry when it might never happen. What can we do to work together to ensure that doesn't eventuate? How can I support you? You know, asking all of those kind of questions might actually change his perception. But also, you know, there's a roles and responsibilities when it comes to being in a partnership of who does that worrying, and how do you talk about it with the other person, and how do you bring up those conversations, because we all worry about different things, and it is hard to share those burdens with somebody else if they don't necessarily feel them or experience them in the same way that we do. So, you know, noticing what that's bringing up for you, I wonder if there's been a piece of conversation that you've had with him around how that makes you feel, or that you're worried for him, or that, you know, you appreciate him considering that option, and how can you both deal with it to make sure it doesn't occur? Does that resonate and make sense? Awesome, thumbs up, great. Hopefully that helps. You know, because I often think that in relationships, we're not the best communicators when it comes to this kind of thing. You know, it's really hard to share our worries because it takes us a while to process them for ourselves. And then how do you broach that with somebody else when you're sharing information as opposed to wanting to be fixed, you know, because it's not necessarily a problem. So I often find that now when I talk to David about something that's, you know, coming out, the first thing I start with is, hey, I'm processing this, or something interesting happened to me today. A thought popped in my head and I want to share it with you because, you know, or I'm feeling a bit funny today. I'm not sure what I'm processing, but I'm processing things. You know, it's really interesting because the more I realize that I'm aware of myself, the more I notice, the less I share with him. Not because I consciously do it, but because I subconsciously do it. I have this expectation that that man is in my head. He knows me so well that he just picks up on these things. And to him, picking up on these things is different, because if I have a state of worry going on for any reason, that puts him into, I must protect her, I must look after her frame of mind. Do you know what I mean? So it becomes really interesting as your level of self-awareness kicks in and kicks up a notch, your ability to communicate how you're growing as a person needs to match that. So bring your other half into that conversation and into that depth of self-awareness and your journey that you're on, because that will make a huge difference. Okay, so I'm just going to read into the third insight. Okay, so the third insight, again, I'm going to keep saying this, don't waste time and energy on an imagined future, especially if it makes you feel powerless and out of control. So just noticing those feelings about where you're holding your power with those imagined futures. You know, this isn't about consciously creating the vision that you do want. This is about noticing when you're starting to think about the things that you don't want and how long you're sitting in that space. So things that you can do, and these are the things that I've written in the book. Be mindful of the time, energy, and focus you give to thoughts which lead you astray and make you feel powerless and out of control. That's a specific one. So it's literally just exactly as I said it. You know, noticing where you're spending your time visualizing, if it's in the good place or in the negative place, and how much time and focus you're actually putting yourself there. Instead, stay in the current moment and find your peace there. So when I talk about that, staying in the current moment and finding your peace there, what I mean is that's the whole thing about, is there anything I can do about this potential right now? You know, if I'm worrying about this future state, is there something I can be doing in this moment to stop that from occurring, or to make peace with that if it does occur, or to trust myself that I'm not going to allow that to eventuate, you know, or trust myself to deal with this when it does happen. You know, there's a lot of things that we go through in our lives that we have to prepare ourselves for. You know, one of them being ultimately, you know, we're going to lose people, friends, family, loved ones. And how do we ever prepare ourselves for that? But we don't sit there worrying needlessly that we're going to lose somebody, because we have no control over that time and the destiny that is going to occur when that does happen. You know, and, you know, with that comes a sense of peace that all we can do in this present moment is let those other people know how much they mean to us and really value and love the connection that we have with them. Because one day or other we are going to be parted in this existence, and that's something that we can't necessarily control, but we can control how we respond to it right now. And that might be being, you know, simply picking up the phone and making a phone call. You know, if it's worrying about, you know, your business, your relationship, those kind of things, then what can you do right now in this moment to be at peace with what might eventuate? You know, phone a previous client, phone a current client, get some feedback, go to testimonials in your business and remind yourself of how great you are, even when you're doubting yourself. You know, there's so many really positive ways of getting you out of that negative feeling that you might be stuck in, and really finding some peace in the present. You know, that's a really important state to be in. So even asking yourself those simple questions, is there anything I can do about this right now? Yes, no. Okay, what do I need to feel at peace in this moment? You know, and it might be that you go and do a ritual. It might be that you go out to the gym. It might be that you sit down and meditate, make a cup of coffee, phone a friend, do some work, get practical, give your kids a hug, whatever it could be. You know, do the thing that makes you feel great in that moment, and allow those worries and fears that are out of your control and make you feel powerless to evaporate, because they shouldn't have any power over you. And essentially, it is something that is in your mind, and your mind is incredibly powerful. So don't allow yourself to sit in those states that are unproductive and unhealthy for you, you know? Okay. So remember to go and download your Insight application worksheets, and make the most of going through the Insight applications for yourselves, and really think about over the next week where you sit in this state. You know, how often do you sit in that imagined future state and worry about things that you're not vibing high with, you know? So if nobody has any questions, I will head off. And thanks, Hun, for a great live, like always. Oh, you're so welcome, Lisa. You're so welcome. Okay, so for those of you that do watch the replay, if you've got any queries or questions around any of this, then please just write in the comments, let me know, and I will most definitely get back to you. And I really hope that you're enjoying these insights. So we've got what, 9 days left. So 9 days of insights to go. So I'm looking forward to it. All right. Have an incredible day. I hope you got what you needed from today's live. I've certainly found it very reflective for me going through, and you know, each of these insights for me really has been a journey, and they have moved me through a process for sure around self-awareness and owning my purpose and my journey, and really, you know, enjoying my life by getting me out of the states that don't serve me. So depending on how you choose to use these insights, they can be pretty powerful things. So much love. Have an incredible day, and I will see you all soon. Thank you again for joining. Bye.